Here are 3 uncomfortable parenting truths that you may have started to realize as a result of listening to podcasts like this or reading books and learning all about parenting. Number 1, when we treat our kids in a way that takes away their power and their autonomy, they resist us more. Number 2, when that happens, many of us, without even realizing, fall back on coercion. Coercion is just forcing or pressuring someone to do something against their will. And number 3, there is a definite cost. Damaged trust, power struggles, and a kid who is less willing to collaborate with us. I've said everything like this in the past. I don't care, find it later, just get in the car, or, sorry, but that's enough, just give me your phone. Thank you. So the thing is, where do we draw the line though? I think we love the idea of not coercing our kids and respecting them as human beings, but how do we actually make it work in this day and age? This is Vivek Patel's jam. Some of you will already know his name. If not, he is the founder of Meaningful Ideas, and he has spent decades championing a groundbreaking approach, and some will call radical, called Noncoercive Collaborative Parenting. I happen to love it. By the way, welcome back to the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Pinto. Today's episode is probably going to challenge everything you thought you knew about what is going on when your kids arc up or challenge you or ignore you or just have their cranky pants on. Also, if you've ever struggled with when your child says no, or if you feel really stuck when they resist your guidance, or if you've wondered, is there a better way to gain their cooperation in those times where, you really need to get things done, then you have landed on the perfect conversation today. In this episode, Vivek breaks down his powerful model, guide, friend framework, giving you not just a list of what not to do, but also clear practical steps on what to do instead. Some of the big questions we covered are, can non-coercive parenting really work, or does it kind of create kids who just walk all over us? Also, how can we teach our kids to have boundaries and to say no, protecting them from peer pressure later in life? And why is hearing no from our kids so triggering? And how do we shift our mindset to receive no as a gift? Also, this is really cool. Vivek told me how his now 28-year-old daughter was raised with this approach, despite the fact that he grew up in a household full of control, full of coercion, zero respect. His story is really inspiring. It's actually really practical, and it is proof that this way works. Oh, and here's a really cool quote that stuck with me, and I hope it sticks with you. See if you can listen out during the episode and hear it. When your child says no, say, "Thank you so much for telling me your truth." Radical, right? But I promise you, if you feel like you are beating the same drum and you're trying the same things and it is not working, why wouldn't you try something new? So if you're ready to break free of the old paradigm of control and coercion and embrace a parenting style that's really rooted in trust and connection and collaboration, then this episode is for you. Just before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Darug Nation. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which I live, work, and record this podcast. I pay my respects to all First Nations people, their elders and ancestors, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and I stand in solidarity towards a shared future. Okay, so maybe let's dive straight in, Vivek. Tell us about non-coercive collaborative parenting. Let's go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm Vivek Patel from Meaningful Ideas. And what I share is a parenting style called non-coercive collaborative parenting. And it's not a fancy name, but it's a very descriptive name. And that's what I like about it. I like long descriptive names. And the non-coercive part is what we don't do. We don't force our kids. We don't control them. The collaborative part is what we do. I call it the don't do and the do. And I like that very much. And so, because it helps us to think, what do we don't do? But if you only think of the don't do, then there's a big gap. And people say, well, what do you do then, Vivek? Well, okay, then we have the collaborative. That's what we do. And so I have a tremendous amount of information on both the don't do and the do, especially on my YouTube channel, where I have over 200 videos that go into a lot of detail about this. But basically, the idea is we really want to treat our kids as whole human beings. They're not our property. They're not to be controlled. We want to respect their consent. We want to respect their autonomy. We want to respect who they are as humans, their humanity. This is so important, largely because we're informing them about their own self-worth by the way we treat them. And this is so important for me. When my kid was born, my kid's 28, almost going to be 28 now, and married and has a job and just came back from her honeymoon. Like she's an adult.
What? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I feel like whenever we last spoke, maybe it was just 26 or something. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, it's amazing. She's so we were playing chess this evening remotely. We're still such good friends, which is one of the most best things about this kind of parenting is the kids don't, I mean, I'm kind of doing an aside here, but the kids don't feel the need to separate from you even when they go off into their own lives. You know, it's so beautiful. The two of us are still so close. But she's 28, and when she was born in 1997, I was obsessive about this. I did not want her to see me as an authority figure. I wanted her to see me as a fellow human, and we were learning together, and we were problem solving together, and we were figuring out how to live life together. And when you want to really have this deep relationship with someone, and who better to have a deep relationship than with your kid, you know? Then approaching it from an authoritative standpoint doesn't really create the safety and the openness for that kind of vulnerability.
No.
No, it really doesn't. And so, but then what do we do? So then we do the collaborative part. I didn't want to. So she grew up with no rules, no punishments, no consequences. And I say no rules because rules require enforcement, and enforcement requires power. That's the problem with rules. It's very different than guidelines and shared values and agreements and experiments, right? Like these are like such beautiful things, and explorations. And that's the kind of relationship that we fostered. So then we were always exploring things, and we were always communicating. We were always really listening deeply to each other's needs. And that's the do. That's what we do is we listen to our kids, we listen to their needs, we help them learn about their own needs and how to meet them. And in doing that, they learn to care about our needs. It's an amazing thing to witness how kids, their desire to cooperate with us just increases dramatically when we show them that we really care about their needs.
Wow, that's beautiful. And is there an element of like sharing your, for want of a better word, like wisdom as someone who's been on the planet for longer, knows kind of the lay of the land and things that work and don't work? Like, is there some of that mixed in with the collaborative approach? Like, let me help you there. Like, does that make sense?
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, there's three parenting relationships that I talk about that replace the old authoritative. The three are model, guide, and friend. So, and all three of them are mutual. That's the beautiful thing about it. I say the magic is in the mutuality. Yeah, and so we're each other's models, we're each other's guides, and we're friends. So the model, for me, modeling is how I'm modeling how I treat my kid with respect, with kindness, with empathy, with collaboration, with honesty, with, vulnerability, with effective communication. I'm modeling all these things all the time with my kid. How do I respond to conflict? Do I respond by using power? Do I respond by, hey, let's work this out together? And then how do I treat myself is another part of the modeling. And then how do I treat other people and the environment is another part of the modeling. So modeling is like a really deep thing. And there's a lot of wisdom that you can share through how you model. And then there's guide. Guide is the second one. And this is where what you were talking about is like, how do I share wisdom with my kid? And I knew like when she was born, I was 28 and I had 28 years of mistakes that I had made and reflected on and learned from. I didn't want her to go through the same mistakes. I wanted to pass that on.
Yeah.
But I knew, like I was a kid, I knew that when my parents would try and tell me their wisdom, I would roll my eyes and I'd be like, yeah. For me, it was like, yeah, Dad, yeah. Right? I didn't want to hear about it. So I had to think, like, what is going to make this kid open to my guidance?
Yeah.
And that's one of the I focused on, like, really deeply. That's where the friend relationship comes in. That's why all three work together so nicely, right? And so the friend relationship is the deep human relationship of respect and caring about each other and also joy in each other's lives, like real interest and joy in each other's lives and each other's interests and the way we think and the way we feel and the way we process the world and really being interested in that. Like my kid knows that her parents are so interested in her and so admiring of her, right? And she has no doubt about that. And so But the guide part, the other thing about it is she craves our guidance even now. You know, like when she just recently went on her honeymoon, and she was telling us when she first moved out, and she moved into her now living with her wife, and the two of them starting to live a life together and live in their apartment together. And she called us up one day and said, you know, as I'm trying to figure out what to do in this situation and what to do in that situation, I always ask, what would mom do? And that was WWMD became one of our family acronyms. Because she respects both of our wisdoms and our guidance so much that even as a 28-year-old, she carries that with her.
Well, okay, so I need to stop you there because that is
Yeah.
massive. That is so validating for this way of raising humans, that this is the way they turn out. Like, this is, if we want to have humans, adult humans, you know, some of them running the country and some of them working in hospitals and teaching our kids, like, if we want them
Right.
to be honest, to be respectful, to be like hardworking, and to like ticking all those responsible, if we want them to have all the,
Mm,
why are we doing so many of the don'ts that you, I love that, the
mm,
don't do's. Why are we doing so many, like, you know, we make up rules that are arbitrary just because I said so. Like, it really hammers the point home that if we want to raise kids, like humans who are this certain way, then we have to be teaching them how to be like that from
yeah.
ourselves. Anyway, sorry that I just had to go oh, and champion that for a minute. But
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
so,
No, I want
this
you to
was
jump in at any time.
okay
Of
because
course.
this was
I
not.
love to hear your thoughts.
I'm glad because I tried to like hold back and just let you share your wisdom, but this was not the way that you were raised. Is that correct? And
Aha.
how did you, like, this is quite mind-blowing to have, especially a man. I don't want to generalize because there are a lot of great male role models and dads and fathers, but
Sure.
do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
I don't know what my question is, but you've had a turning point. We talked a bit about before we hit record about the like years, the wealth of experience that you've had working with kids as well, and you have your own child. But where did that sort of shift happen for you? That's hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, when I was brought up with a lot of spanking and punishments and wrongness and blame and shame and constantly told that I wasn't good enough. And I still remember the day that I knew I was big enough that my dad couldn't hit me anymore. I was about 15 years old. And I remember him coming towards me and I kind of puffed out my chest and I looked at him in the eye and I said, yeah, try it, try it. I still remember that. And he was like, he backed down, right? He knew that it was over. And at that moment, he had no influence on me.
Yeah.
And I had all this power come into me. But I had learned none of the values, none of the um, way of thinking about it, none of the use of power. So I didn't have any way of managing it. Plus, I had all these years of pain and oppression in me. I do workshops in prisons as well, and when I talk to those guys, I talk about the ball of fire in my gut, and they all are nodding when I say that. They know exactly what that ball of fire is like.
Oh yeah.
And so in my yeah,
My
you sound
husband,
like you know about that
my
ball of
husband is
fire
the
too.
same. Yeah, Alex is the same. He's
Ah,
been on the podcast a couple
aha.
of times, maybe three times, and he has spoken about not specifically that like fire, but
Yeah.
the absolute like I don't know, is it the part of the energy and maybe the testosterone and the like we're very different, but he's got this like
Mm, mm,
it's hard to put into words.
hmm Yeah, and so then in my teens and in all the way up to my early 20s, I was a very aggressive young man. I got into a lot of fights all the time. I got into
You?
drugs.
No.
Yeah, I led a life of crime and violence, honestly.
I
And
can't
I had a
even
whole
picture that.
yeah, I know, because I changed. That's the point, right? But that wasn't how I grew up. That's why when I speak in prisons, those guys they can really hear me because they know I've come from a similar lifestyle as them. And the only reason I'm alive and not in prison was just by grace, honestly, because I was heading down that path. A number of things in my early to mid 20s shifted. I got taken under the wing of some early 90s feminists that really showed me about social justice stuff that I had no idea about and helped me. I call it having my feminist awakening, where I saw my own misogyny that I didn't even know existed, and saw that how I was dehumanizing women unconsciously because of the way my patriarchal programming had warped my mind to see women as less valid humans. And then I saw, well, wait a minute. Then it was not only women; it was also, I mean, my family's from India, but still, I was full of racism, full of ableism, full of homophobia and transphobia. Like all of the isms and the phobias were like became so clear to me, and so in changing that and dismantling that, I really started to humanize myself, which is a whole big thing because it's very difficult to it's very difficult to uh, stop dehumanizing others and then you are still dehumanizing yourself. The two kind of go hand in hand. So I started to really heal myself through that. I also met a spiritual teacher who really hammered home for me that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and so that really stuck with me. And he believed in me more than I even believed in myself in those days, and so that really helped because it's really nice to have someone believe in you,
Oh yeah.
and really nobody else did. My mom kind of, but even she had her own trauma to deal with. So
Yeah.
and a bunch of things. There's a bunch of things. But then my kid came along, right? And I was like, I don't want her to go through all that crap that I went through. And I was like, I remember when she popped out. It's funny. None of this is what we were going to talk about. When
I
she
know.
popped out, when she popped out, I remember I was right there, and I went right into her face and I looked into her eyes. Her eyes were wide open, and I looked right into her eyes. And for the first 30 seconds, as soon as she popped out, I just went really close to her. I held her and I went, I love you, 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 I love you. And I didn't let anyone touch her. I just did that. Then we right away put her on mom's chest.
Mm.
But as I was saying that, she said, thank you. And I could hear her psychically in my head. She said, thank you. And if you treat me like most parents treat their kids, I'm going to hate you when I'm a teenager. And I went,
Oh, my heart. Oh my goodness.
yeah. And I said, thank you. Thank you. And I took it seriously. And so at that moment, like I took all of my rebellion and I focused the rebellion on the traditional parenting paradigm. And I used that energy to fight against coercion, to fight against what all of society was telling me I had to do. I lost friends, I lost family, I was publicly humiliated, and as soon as I got on Facebook and started writing about this stuff, the number of people, I mean, still to this day, but it bothers me less today. But in the early days, like even my closest friend was like, "You're disgusting for experimenting on your child," and we already know established way of parenting.
Yeah.
And this was like somebody that like we were so close, and he just couldn't take it, you know. So like those early days, we became like a really tight knit family because so much of the world was against us treating our kid with respect, you know. And so wild times.
Yeah. Wow. That is,
Yeah,
yeah, that is wild.
yeah. And one of the biggest things, and here's my segue, one of the biggest things that we focused on was respecting our child when she said no, right from the very beginning. And also trying our best never to say no to her. The two are kind of linked, because both of them were about really respecting her direction, her desires, her impulses, her consent and autonomy. And that became one of the biggest things. When she would say no, I would always receive it as a gift. Like honestly, in my heart, I would feel joy when she would say no because I couldn't. It took me years to be able to say no, and even now I struggle with it.
Oh, me
I'll
too.
say yes. Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's so hard. There's so many stories, there's so many layers behind it. Every time I say no, I feel like I'm letting someone down or I'm going against the grain or
Right.
like it's just so ingrained. And it's
Right.
a few weeks ago, I don't know when this will air, but a few weeks ago I ran just a masterclass online called Emotional Intelligence for People Pleasers because that was me. And obviously still to some extent, but I'm getting better. I'm like I say I'm a
Right.
recovering people pleaser because
Right.
I'm able to in many more situations than before. I'm able to say no or to decline or to
Yeah.
not just agree. Like, oh yeah, totally,
Mm,
I'll do that, and no problems.
mm.
It's really hard. So I love that we're talking about this.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, a lot of it is fear of rejection, fear
Yeah,
of abandonment, fear of judgment. And yeah, and I didn't want that for my kid, you know. Again, I didn't want that. So when she would say no, I would always go to her and thank her for it. I would say, "Thank you so much for this." Is one of my sayings was, "Thank you so much for telling me your truth." That's what I would say. Thank you so much for telling me your truth. And even if she would say yes, this is the thing. Even if she would say yes, if I asked her, "Could you do this? Can you do the dishes?" and she would say, "Sure." If I heard that there was even a little bit of hesitancy, I would say, "Hey, are you sure? Because if you don't want to do it, the thing that's most important to me is that you follow your truth. And if you don't want to do the dishes, it would make me the happiest thing is if you don't do the dishes, because I'd love to do them instead. Because we do that." And then this is where the guiding comes in. Then I would say, because we love doing things for each other and we love caring for each other's experience and we love taking care of the home together.
Mm.
And this is something that I would love to do for you. And I know you love to do it for me too when you feel like it. But I really want to make sure that you're not doing it because you feel pressured or feel like you should. And so I always would throw those. I call it modeling out loud. I'm not
Mm.
just modeling, but I'm modeling out loud. I'm actually saying what the value is and saying what the benefit is and saying how it feels and saying why we do it. But yeah, so I would question the yes if it didn't feel like a big yes. And then I would also thank her for the no. I remember I was talking to her, chatting on WhatsApp with her just before this, and I was telling her, "Oh, I'm going to come on and talk about receiving no as a gift." And she was like, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." And I remembered when she was 18, and we were laughing about this just now. When she was 18, we were driving in the car, and she said no to me about something, and I said, thank you so much for saying no." And she turned to me, she's like. And she said, "Dad, you don't have to say thank you every time I say no anymore. I get it. You like it when I say no." And I said, "Thank you for telling me." And then because I was again thanked her for saying no to me saying no, and the contradiction in that we both laughed hysterically over it.
Oh.
And but like it's really deep in her that she can honor herself, you know. And so I think this just it's such a beautiful thing. And the thing is, because she had never had to use no as a defense mechanism because we always honored it. I call it the organic no. The organic no is the no that's your truth. It comes from your boundaries. It comes from your deep sense of what's right and wrong for you, but also what's right and wrong for the community, what feels good, what feels out of alignment. Yeah, that's the organic no and the organic yes. The opposite, of course, is the inorganic no and the inorganic yes, which is the defense mechanism. The inorganic yes is compliance out of fear. The inorganic no is defense and resistance and a protective mechanism, which actually is great that they have a protective mechanism if they have to protect themselves. But I don't want them to have to. I don't want my kids to have to protect themselves against me. So I didn't want to create a condition where they had to use an inorganic no against me as a protective mechanism, right? And so my kid is extremely aware of her organic no, of her truth, and she's not afraid to stand up for herself. And this is a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. And because everybody always says, "But what about when they go to work? And what about when they go to work and they have to deal with other people and they can't take no?" My kid, wherever she goes, immediately becomes the favorite employee. It's an amazing thing to watch. Like, I didn't know that would happen. I kind of thought that would happen, but I didn't know that would happen. But every job she's had, people just love her and they flock around her. And because one of my sayings is, people say if you don't give kids consequences, they won't listen to their boss. But I say, what if they care about their boss?
Yeah.
And this is what happens. She treats the people she works with and her bosses like human beings. She doesn't fear authority. For her, there's no hierarchy in her mind, right? It's just people working together to create something, to do something. And they feel that from her, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a different way of looking at working together.
You know what? Can I jump in with something
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you mentioned, her at the workplace with a boss and things like that. And this story just jumped in my mind. So I'll share it really quickly because it's obviously related.
Totally.
Is that back in my therapy days, I used to be a speech pathologist, and I had
Ah,
quite quickly, I had two different managers because one left and then one, someone else took over. And they were on the outside, very similar type of therapists themselves, went into the manager position. One of them, though, really, I shouldn't say ruled by fear, but really did not make you feel safe. Didn't make vulnerability a thing. Like, it was, how are your billable hours? how many clients are you seeing? Like,
Oh,
why was this gap here on your calendar? Blah, blah, blah.
oh,
And then on the other hand, I had, someone else who was just everything you're talking about, like respect, compassion, communication on my level, even though she was, a manager and I was a therapist.
right.
So basically chalk and cheese. And I would have bent over backwards. And I did for
Mm,
the manager who was respectful, who asked about my family life and checked if I was okay,
mm,
and put all of these other human to human things above the dollars that I was bringing in as a therapist. Like it is just so, it's a really good kind of way to illustrate that exactly what you're
yeah,
talking about. Like it didn't matter that she was above me or my boss or manager, but
right.
the way that she just connected with me and, like I said, yeah, respectful and things like that. I wanted to help. I was like, no, yeah, I'll stay back and do that. Are you sure? Absolutely. Like, what can I do to help? Because I love it's wild. So
That's so beautiful. That's a great story.
yeah. Mm.
And the contrast that you had the in real time contrast.
Yeah. One after the other. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is
Yeah.
different. Uh,
Yeah, recently somebody asked me to ask my kid, like, what was it like when you started going to school and interacting with other kids and seeing how their parents treated them?
yes.
Because, like, my kid never got in trouble at home. She doesn't even know what it feels like to
Mm.
get in trouble. It's not in her nervous system. And she knows it happens because she sees it. She saw it on TV, and when she would go to friends' houses and stuff, she knows it exists, but
Mhm.
it's not in her experience, right? And she was saying that it was really hard for her because she knew how good people her friends were, and to see the parents not being able to see that was heartbreaking for her because she loved her friends. And when they would come over to our house, a lot of the time when kids would come over to our house, her friends, they would stand in the foyer in shock for a few minutes before they could come in, just watching how we interacted with each other. And like I still remember that, like one after the other, whenever they would bring in, there would be this foyer time. We would call it foyer time because um, because they didn't expect it. There was no hierarchy, there was no wrongness, there was no control, there was no you have to do this, you have to do that. Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? None of that exists, right? And then they would come in and they would slowly integrate and they would let down their defenses. And so many times these young people would share about their home lives and share about the struggles and not feeling seen, not feeling accepted for who they are. And even the ones that had good relationships with their parents, but the parents were still authoritative and still had the criticisms. And one of the fundamental principles of non-coercive collaborative parenting is called no wrongness.
Mm.
And I love no wrongness, although it's hard. It's a hard thing to grasp. No wrongness means no matter what my kid did, I never said that they were wrong. I never told them that they were wrong. Because if you look at it from a different perspective, everything is a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Everything is an opportunity to learn about our values, to learn about how we want to treat people, to learn about what kind of people we want to be, to learn about what kind of relationships we want to have, what kind of world we want to contribute. I call these the self-reflective questions. What kind of world that we want to contribute to? What kind of impact do we want to have? What are our values? What are our hopes and dreams? What are our priorities? Like these are the beautiful questions that we can explore with our kids. Much better than pick up your shoes and put them on the shoe rack, and so these kids would come in and they would have this opportunity to experience this kind of dynamic, and it was mind blowing for them. Even now, when she runs into one of them at the mall or something, like 20 years later, one of the first things they say is, "How's your dad?"
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Partly, how's your dad? Because I volunteered in school a lot. I also was a
Huh.
very active volunteer school. I was chair of the school council for 6 years,
Mm.
and I taught math and English and music, and I just was like always there. I co-coached all the sports teams. I was like super volunteer,
Oh.
and so all the kids knew me, and I was the only adult that they had met with all these kids. And I was with some of these kids for 9 years because I was there all the time. And I was the only adult that they had ever met that treated them with this level of respect, that didn't talk from an authoritative place. Because even the nicest adults still have that authoritative slant to how they talk. It's like, oh, how are you? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I like, oh, and me, I'm not like that. I'm like, they can, because when I was 13, Stephanie, when I was 13, I remember thinking, please don't let me grow up into an adult that treats 13-year-olds this way.
Mm.
And I thought, I can't forget what it's like to be 13. I bunched up my fists and I squinted my face and I went, I'm 13, I'm 13. I can't forget what it's like to be 13. And I still remember that moment. And when I'm with young people, they know I remember that moment,
Yeah.
And I think that's one reason that they're so open with me.
Yeah. They would just be drawn to you because you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question.
Sure.
What are some of the obstacles to us accepting no from our kids when they don't want to do something or we've asked or whatever? What are some of those
Yeah.
obstacles? Because they're going to be things getting in the way. I can already,
Right.
and what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure, because it's such an old the traditional parenting paradigm is such an old pattern that's in all of us.
Yeah.
I had to fight it too. Like when my kid came along, one of my sayings in the early days was, my ideology is clashing with my reality.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And we're surrounded by, like, especially at
Right.
school, the whole
Yeah.
system and the way that kids are, um, treated in school, and they
Hmm.
have to conform and
Hmm.
comply and earn free time or earn
Hmm.
rewards. Like, that's a whole story for another episode, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So we're fighting. I think you use the word, you have to fight against it. It's so
Fight.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the things that really gets to us is fear. We can really be afraid because every time I post about this, I get a slew of comments saying, "Oh, but then your kid's never going to want to do anything. Oh, then they're not going to cooperate. Oh, but in life you have to do things you don't want to do." I just had someone recently say, "Oh, but in life you have to do things you don't want to do." I said, "There's nothing you have to do." They said, "Yeah, I have to get up and go to work. I don't have a choice." I said, "You have a choice. You can just not do that." I said, "But the reason you do it is because you care about your kids, you care about your family, and you want to give them a good life. So you make the sacrifice to do it. You're actually doing it for a really noble reason. It's not for no reason. It's not because you have to."
And there is a
And she
choice.
was,
Like, they say, even no choice is making a choice. Like, obviously,
right.
a lot of us choose to sacrifice and wake up, and because we need to keep the lights on or put food on the table. But you're
Right.
right. Like, there is actually a choice, and
Yeah.
we are choosing to do that thing that sometimes is like a bit difficult, or we
Yeah.
wish we don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how do we inspire our kids to do that? It's not by forcing them to do chores. That's going to make them want to do it, right? It's the value underneath. For me, I call it iceberg consciousness. It's always going underneath the surface. What are the values underneath? So let's say you have a fear that your kid's never gonna do the dishes, never gonna clean up after themselves. Then what I do is I think, okay, first of all, your fear is valid. Fears have information in them. I don't want the fear to dictate how I'm gonna apply the strategy to solve the problem or to work with the problem. But the fear does tell us there is something worth noticing here. So like if you have that fear, you're like, okay, yeah, maybe there is a concern that if I don't help my kid learn about taking care of themselves and taking care of the home, that they never will. And we know lots of adults out there are like that. I struggle so hard with the executive functioning of doing the dishes that it's like kryptonite for me. It's so hard. And I'm better now that I've been, in my current living conditions. I'm the only one that can do the dishes, but still, it was so hard for me. Um, but 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 so what I do is I think about what are the values and the attitudes that are necessary to give rise to the desire to want to care for the shared living space. Well, it's like caring about your impact on other people. It's about valuing your own space and your own mental health and how space affects your mental health. It's about caring about the community, and and this idea of doing hard things even when it's hard, even when there's no benefit, even when the consequence is challenging. Why would you do the right thing? Right? Consequences don't teach you that level of doing the right thing. And I wanted my kid to always do what she felt was right, even if it was hard, even if nobody ever found out about it. She did it because she knew it was the right thing to do. And that kind of thing you can't force, but you can inspire. So I shifted my whole mindset from trying to make her do things to inspiring the values and inspiring through relationship, right? So that's one of the things. That's one of the things. When we notice the fear, say, yes, this fear has information, but let me use a more positive way of dealing with what the fear is giving me information about. So that's one thing. Another thing is, do you want to say anything about fear before I go on? I have another
Only
one that's,
no, well, only that it's so relatable. I think we all
yeah,
have that undercurrent of fear because it's surrounding us, and it's on
yeah,
TV and things like that. And it's also probably how we were
yeah,
raised. You know, if you don't do this, your
yeah.
child will rule the roost, and you will be a doormat, and they will never do. Like it's just so loud. So the fear is
Right.
real. Yeah.
Right. And that rule the roost thing and be a doormat thing, like I tell parents you don't want to be a doormat, but the solution to not being a doormat, again, it's not coercion. It's helping kids feel empathy for you, helping kids care about your experience, right? And you can't force someone to care. You cannot force someone to care. You cannot make someone care, but you can inspire it.
I love that
You
I
can.
think that's a
Yeah.
third time because I wrote it down,
Yeah.
inspire. You said
Yeah.
it at the start, you said it again. I like that. It's that
Mm.
concept of how can I inspire through my relationship
Hmm.
with you?
Hmm.
I love you, and we work together. And like this is, yeah, I
Yeah.
just love that.
My mom's not well, and I'm taking care of her right now. And sometimes, excuse me, sometimes she is really not well, and her voice sounds really bad, and she sounds really weak. It's hard. It's really hard. And my daughter has such a close relationship with her grandma. The two of them are like twins. They're like so. Because my mom, unlike my dad, my mom was like she saw we were doing things differently, and she said, "I'm going to join in, and I'm going to do my best to follow along." So kudos to her for making that big leap because it's a big leap. Even now, she asks me questions like, "Vivek, how do you do that?" She really wants to know. But my dad was like the whole thing is bull, and he wouldn't do it. And so my kid has almost no relationship with my dad. But my mom and her are so close. She loves her granny so much, and so I know that hearing her granny in distress would be really hard for her. I didn't want her to have to experience that. It would be really emotional for her. And the other day, my mom was really going through a hard time. And I thought, one thing that'll really cheer her up is to hear my kid's voice. So I messaged her and I said, would you be willing to talk to Granny right now? But I warn you, she's in a really bad state and it'll be difficult for you to hear her. And she said, Dad, I want to help, even if it's hard. And that really touched me, because I've never told her she had to do that. I never told her she was wrong for not doing that. Because those are the way that we either tell kids they have to do it or we tell them they're wrong for not doing it, right? That's punishment and reward. That's a subtle way of punishing and rewarding. It's different than inspiring, but always inspiring, inspiring. Part of inspiring is storytelling too. I used to love telling stories. I remember one time I was at a dance retreat because I'm a dancer and I love to dance and I go to dance retreats. And I was at this dance retreat and the group of us were sitting around at this outdoor nature center, and one of the people that was one of the managers was part of my little group. We were sitting and talking, and they were saying, there's a health inspector coming, and we have 200 people here right now, all dancing. This is the worst possible time for this health inspector to come to this retreat center. I really wish they weren't coming. And then she goes, I hope they get into a car accident on the way here so they don't show up.
Oh God. Oh no.
So I jumped in. I said, you know what? What I do in these situations is I imagine this person, as they're on their way here, they suddenly get a call. We're giving you your dream job on the other side of the country, and we've got a house for you and triple the salary, and they're going to meet the partner of their dreams over there, and they turn the car around, they go to the airport, and they have the best life they've ever had. We still achieve the same goal. They're not coming.
Uh,
Right. And everybody there was like, wow, that's great, Vivek. I want to start doing that from now on. So then I came home and I told my kid that story with just like all of this enthusiasm. And she made that value her own. Even to this day, she talks about that story 20 years later. She made that value her own. That's part of inspiring.
yeah.
In order to do that, of course, we have to live that. Right. How are you living your life, my friends? That's a good question to ask. How are you living your life? How are you embodying your own values? And how are you constantly on a learning path, on a growth path? How are you bringing kindness and compassion and wisdom into the world? And then sharing that process and that path with your kid in a way that feels full of joy and full of connection, and it creates that like inspiring and wonderful relationship. So that's how I approach things. And you know, like having being the closest of friends with my 28-year-old, it's good evidence for me.
Yeah, it's a testament. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah,
Wow. Well, you know
yeah.
what? I think the big takeaway, or no, the the aha moment for me, the light bulb moments, is just this idea of, I mean, there's so many, but inspire through your
Mm,
connection and through your relationship,
mm,
and starting there and building that, because without that we have no influence over our kids. We don't want to coerce them, we don't want to force them, but we want to be able to share what we know and help model and guide. And I think that only
yeah,
comes through, our ability to inspire them, because otherwise they're closed off and they're shut down and they're not listening. So gosh, we could talk for another 2 hours, but I just want to thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing so wholeheartedly. I think you're such a gift, and the way that you see kids and the way that you see relationships between people. There's such, I think you said,
mm,
learning opportunities. There's so much in there
mm,
that we can dig into and go, why did that upset me? Or
yeah,
why does this feel uncomfortable? Like, so
mm.
much deeper than what what we see on the surface level. So I just want to say a massive thank you, for what you
Well,
do.
thank you, Stephanie. And I want to say, I just love the work that you put out into the world too. You really encourage people to look deeper beyond behavior to like your emotional intelligent parenting. It's so profound because it really helps people look deeper, operate from a different mindset. And I know that you affect so many parents and have helped so many kids in their lives as well. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm pretty careful with who I
Yeah.
have on the podcast, and I think our stuff aligns so perfectly.
Very much so.
A whole chunk of being emotionally intelligent as a parent and wanting to teach it to our kids means that
Mm,
we have to turn our eyes inward and look at
mm,
how are we, showing up, how are we behaving, what are our
yeah.
choices, and what are our values. You
Yeah.
mentioned values. Like,
Yeah.
there's just so much. And so I'm so glad you were able to come on, because you have a
For
lot going
sure.
on, and I want to honor that,
Well, thank
and
you.
say thank you.
Thanks so much. Can I let people know how to find me?
Please do. That was my next
Yeah.
question. Where can people find
Wonderful.
you? Where can they find your YouTube, your on socials, and your website? Everything. Let's tell us.
Fantastic. So everywhere I'm Meaningful Ideas. Most of my writing is on Facebook, at Meaningful Ideas. On YouTube, I have over 200 videos there. Some are full workshops, and some are just 2, 3, 4, 5 minute videos. And just going through those 200 videos, honestly, it's mind blowing. And I also have a website, meaningfulideas.com, where I have a free course called Guiding Without Controlling. It's a 40-minute video that's just like people have said they go back to it and watch it again and again and again because it's really life changing. I also have a few paid courses over there. One of them's called Recovering from a Parenting Mistake with Maximum Change and Minimum Shame, because I like long titles, as I mentioned
Yeah.
before. And I also have a membership group that I've just recently started where you can click at the top at meaningfulideas.com on membership, and where I'm going live once a week to talk exactly like this once a week on a different specific topic. And I have like really detailed notes like I had for today. I have really detailed notes that I work from. And we've talked about empathy, and we've talked about how to recover after yelling, and we've talked about how to deal with it when your kids say something that hurt your feelings, and how to bridge that and do repair there in a non-coercive way. And we just go really deep. And I'm going live once a week. Plus, we do guided meditations, and I would love people to join me there. And also on all the other social medias, I'm Meaningful Ideas as well.
Okay, Meaningful Ideas. Cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna put
yeah,
everything in the show notes below, so you guys can go and
wonderful.
follow and get in touch with Vivek, and just absorb more of the gifts that he is putting out. So thank you. Hey guys, it's Steph here again. Was that not a super thought-provoking episode and conversation with Vivek? Look, if today's episode has sparked something in you, maybe it's time to ask yourself, is the power dynamic in my home helping or maybe hurting? Because here's the truth. When we keep falling back on control and coercion, we are not just creating conflict in the moment. We're actually shaping how our kids trust, communicate, and collaborate with us for years to come. And like Vivek said, when your child says no, what if just for a moment you saw it as a gift? If you're ready to step out of the power struggles and into a parenting style that's really rooted in trust and connection and collaboration, then there is literally no better time to start. Why wait until tomorrow? Why wait until next week? Just get in there and do it and make some tweaks and some changes. Your kids will not care. If anything, they'll be pleasantly surprised. Just go with it. And a huge thank you to Vivek for sharing his wisdom and all the practical tools today. Please go and check out his work. He's on under Meaningful Ideas on all the platforms, so you can find him there. And if you love this episode, I would ask if you can just share it with a friend or maybe post it on your socials. That makes such a difference. And it's really helpful, I think, for other people who are searching for, new ways to be and do things with their kids at home. Until next time, I'm Stephanie Pinto, and thank you for tuning in to the Emotionally Intelligent Parenting Podcast. Keep on leading with love and emotional intelligence, and I will see you all next week.